Greetings, family. Welcome back to the YouTube channel. Thank you for listening in. And again, this is a YouTube channel, but really it's about learning. So I call it my learning channel. So thank you for listening in. Today I want to talk about a personal story on education for liberation. So for me, I've been teaching 30 years. That's 3 decades. So there has to be something I know and remember and can recall. And all I want to do today is share my real position on the state of education today, where it has really gone, where it started, but where we are at today. So I want to kind of explain some dynamics about why I have done what I have done over the years. And I really personally dedicate this to my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, Helen E. Moore. So I say that because when I start looking at the overlaps of our lives, grandmothers, parents, family, elders, they are the reason why we are here. We don't honor our ancestors, there's no reason for us to even be here. So I honor her. I dedicate this presentation on the education for liberation to Helen Elizabeth Perry Moore, our maternal grandmother who was born 1902, passed 1998. So you see her with her beautiful life colors. So when I say dedicating it to her, wow, there's some things in history that I never understood as a child, and you don't understand those until you get older. I remember she had some images and some artifacts from Haiti back in the day. Haiti wasn't even on my mind as a child, but she had artifacts, wooden guns, or some artwork from Haiti. So I got a soldier named Ron Welcome who shared this book with me called Black Spartacus, The Epic Life of Toussaint Louverture. Excellent book by Sudhar Hazara Singh. I definitely recommend this. But we don't talk about Haiti being a very important country in their history and what they did to change the nature of how Western imperialism deals with African people. In 1791, in August, there was a slave insurrection that began in Saint Domingo. And so in 1795, Toussaint launched a full-scale attack on the British positions. You know, he defeated the French, British, Spanish, all comers. So it wasn't by himself, of course, but he was a leader. So he, in this book, really gives a great foundation on what he struggled with. He tried to get people to focus on, the collective. And when they had actually won and defeated, and people started to sit back and act like they are free, no, you got to continue to fight for your freedom. They considered him harsh because he was pushing, telling people to, get to work. And so they wanted to call him a slave master. But he wasn't a slave master, saying that we now have to control our environment. So Toussaint Louverture was kind of misunderstood, but his epic life, if you read this story, you understand what he was going through, trying to raise the consciousness of our African people. So he was actually interned in France. He made a mistake trying to deal with the enemy and actually got, his first actual trip out of the island. Out of the island Hispaniola was gone in France, and he died in prison in France. But look at the epic story of Toussaint. I just know that my family has had some opportunities to go to Haiti in the past on my paternal side of the family. So just the Haiti connection. Haiti has been the fire that lit the soul for African people to talk about revolution throughout the world. It was a spark, and it is still burning today, but we don't understand it. That's why Haiti is such a bad position, because we don't appreciate the history. We don't talk about it. What? Because we don't teach it. The only way it's going to be taught is if we have our own schools that deal with the realities of what happened to us as a people. And that's why we now go to a person like Carter G. Woodson. There's his image, but a lot of people don't even know his name. They don't even know what he did. Carter G. Woodson helped create, of course, Black History Week, which turned to Black History Month. But Carter G. was an educator, and he himself did not want to spend his time in the university system. He wanted to go to the educational level where the teachers were teaching his kids before they got to the university level. He was trying to change the whole scope of how education is being taught. So for me, knowing that Carter G. Woodson was a very powerful educator, and we don't know his name. We have to continually to talk about his name. So, of course, one of his most famous books is The Miseducation of the Negro. It definitely should be on your shelf. A cool brother named Jeff Minzy has a publishing company called Mind on the Matter. You got to get his books, but he did a book called Dumbing Down, Reflections on the Miseducation of the Negro. So he parallels the chapters from The Miseducation of the Negro by Carter G and makes it contemporary. Definitely get this book. And again, he has multiple other texts, but check him out on mindonthematter.com. And then I read this book called Fugitive Pedagogy. Of course, pedagogy means how do you teach? How do you distribute knowledge? Fugitive. So in the context of him explaining this, he's talking about how, you have to go on your own to teach people the right way. If the system's telling you to teach something and you know it's not right, on the side, you need to be telling people what's really going on. That's why it's called fugitive pedagogy. Interesting because it's done by a brother named Jarvis Givens, who hadn't gone to a HBCU, but he was providing some knowledge that I, as a HBCU graduate, didn't even know. Carter G. Woodson went to my alma mater just for a year, like a semester, but I didn't even know that going to my school. I went to Lincoln University in Pennsylvania. So I went to Lincoln University, got my bachelor's degree, and I went to Howard University and got my graduate degree. So at Lincoln University, I did not know that Carter G had actually set his foot or walked on that land. That's pretty powerful to me because I start to make more connections. I remember my grandmother telling me that she was taught by Carter G. Woodson. I didn't know that, but I'm starting to put the pictures together when I start reading these books today. So speaking of dumbing down, prior to Brother Minzy writing his book, is a book called Dumbing Us Down by John Taylor Gatto. Not a super impressive book, but I definitely would recommend it because it's talking about how education or the curriculum is set up for creating a mindset where you're not really able to be critically think about things. In his document, he's talking about self-knowledge being important, and African people have always talked about self-knowledge being important. Then we have the pedagogy of the oppressed. Again, pedagogy means how you teach people. Paulo Freire was a Brazilian scholar. Wrote this book way back in the 70s, but he was talking about how there's a banking concept and a dialogic concept. Banking means you just give the information, like Christopher Columbus discovered America when? Yeah, you all know the date. He did what? Sailed the ocean what? Yeah, you all know what that means. 1492, sailed the ocean blues. That's the banking concept, just putting something in your head. But then there's dialogics where you converse, you talk about it. So definitely get Pedagogy of the Oppressed because he breaks down about how people who are in a subjugated state are kept in that place. And if you look at Brazilian politics right now, with this guy named Bolsonaro, you see some problems going on in the Brazilian landscape. But you have scholars that have been in the past discussing that. Now, all over the world, people are trying to address education, but here in America, we have had some brilliant scholars that have moved forward to change the landscape. So Woodson, just talked about him. So Woodson, he attended Lincoln University in the fall of 1897. He was a stellar student in the sophomore cohort. I didn't know that. He also went on to be the dean of the School of Liberal Arts and head of graduate faculty at Howard University. What? But just only for a year. He didn't see the HBCU or the university experience as a way to really make the change because they were being funded by white philanthropists or they were giving money that was not necessarily for Black revolution. So by 1992, he severed all ties with the schools and universities. So he was at Howard 1919 to 1920. My grandmother attended Howard University 1919 to 1925. Okay, so that's when I heard from the past when she told me that, she had some contact. It was taught by Carter G. Woodson, so it was on the overlap of time. She had 2 years of teaching at Mary Potter School in Oxford, North Carolina. I really did not know that until I reread her obituary. 2 years in North Carolina. I taught in North Carolina. Now, this is before graduating. Her career began as teacher principal of a high school in Hague, Virginia. And of course, they weren't allowing black students and white students to get together and work together, and because of segregation. So even though black people had degrees, they couldn't get jobs at major institutions, so they had to go teach in their own communities. So she taught in North Carolina, she taught in Virginia, and then she came back home to the neighborhood that I grew up in, a place called Penland, a community up north in Pennsylvania. She was the first black principal of that school. So my grandmother had a great foundation for helping out the black students there to excel and be confident in themselves. And if you look at the record, many of them have gone on to produce. And she was really acknowledged as a great educator in her latter years. But I really did not realize that, because when I knew her as a grandmother, she had retired from teaching, but she was always a supportive person in my life. So that's why I'm dedicating this to her. She taught at the Mary Potter School. It was a boarding school for blacks and was founded by this person named George Shaw in 1889. So I'm looking at this, I'm reading it. So guess what? Shaw graduated from Lincoln University in 1863. Whoa. So I graduated from Lincoln University in 1986. More connections with Lincoln and the people at that stage who were producing. If you did not know, the brother who went on down to Wiley, Texas and did the Great Debater, which Denzel Washington did, that was Melvin Tolson. He went to Lincoln. So you have all these people from Lincoln University back in the day that were using their education and making a change in the world. So my grandmother actually went to Howard. She in 1919 she was a graduate of Ambler High. So back in the day, before she went to Howard, she presented the diploma to the 1995 valedictorian at Wissahickon High School, which was Ambler, changed to Wissahickon. And the guest speaker that day was Henry Vanderwater. Henry Vanderwater was the principal when I was at that school. If it wasn't for Henry Vanderwater, I would not have gone to that HBCU called Lincoln University. He suggested that I apply to this program called the Lincoln Aerospace Engineering Recruitment Program, LASER. So he had a white guy recommending that I go to a black school. So he had many adopted kids from different ethnicities, so he was very conscious in his thinking. So I appreciated that. Even though I had family members that had gone to HBCUs, it was the white principal that encouraged me to go to Lincoln University in Pennsylvania. So after Lincoln, which was founded in 1854, the first school to actually distribute degrees, bachelor's degrees to African Americans. My days there were a good foundation. Charles Duncan was my advisor in psychology. He advised me then to go to Howard University to be taught under his advisor, Leslie Hicks. So now we get the stages of development of people who have passed on and have had an impact. And then when you say pass on and transition during the pandemic, 1919, 20, didn't realize he had passed away during the pandemic. So may his awesome spirit rest in peace. But Dr. Leslie Hicks, he's the one that, again, helped me out to seek my graduate degree and get my PhD. That's me with him in 1992. So the family support, even though I got my PhD in 1992, I got my bachelor's degree in 1986, I wanted to give up. I had no interest in school. My first year, I said, this is not for me. Family support led to an opportunity for me to continue on. And I say self-reliance because we start to look at when we have schools that are focused on us or are understanding us, self-knowledge, you can grow and develop. So my grandmother was there with me in Lincoln my first year. That's my mother, Queen Esther Moore, with me. And again, my father, may his soul rest in peace, was also very supportive for my position to be at Lincoln. I have an aunt and uncle went to Cheney. I have other uncles went to Howard. I got family that has been in the HBCU experience, and that has driven them to excel and to be productive. On the other side there or below, you see me at my book signing for my first book called The Science of Melanin in 1995. My grandmother was there, my mother was there, and my Sunday school teacher was there. It was Gladys Lee. So family support, the community is what's going to drive us to excel. So I'm honored and esteemed to be inducted to the Wissahickon High School Hall of Fame. My grandmother went first as an inductee, and I was able to be inducted in 1995 as I was 1982 graduate, but I'm honored to be following her as an inductee to the Hall of Fame. So my grandmother, She passed away, and before she passed, she actually met her maker. When I say the maker, before she met her maker, she met the man who made the pacemaker. I had like 5 pacemakers. She kept on ticking. She was a powerful force that, again, as the principal of the community school, she impacted all those black children, and they respected her till their, as they moved on in their own careers. So that's my grandmother actually meeting the person who actually made the pacemaker, who kept her alive for several years. And when we talk about black community and self-reliance, now in Penland Village, that's where I'm from, Gloria Stewart Jones wrote an excellent book. During her era, she was able to kind of gather information explaining about that environment and how it was a black settlement that was in this township up north. And can't call it a plantation because it wasn't like white people running that, but you know how they allow us to have our own, let's say mix and mingle. But when we were able to have our own communities, guess what? We created what we wanted. And so I grew up in an area where there's just love and appreciation all around. And even in her book, she talks about, we had this minister named T.L. Davis that was in our community, multiple children. One of them was Clifton Davis. You may have known him because he was in Hollywood working on some sitcoms back in the day. But his dad, T.L. Davis, I'm looking at Dad, T.L. You know what the T.L. stood for? Toussaint Louverture. So that book that I mentioned earlier, you have many people that were naming their children after Toussaint Louverture because of what they knew about Haiti and the revolution. But I would have never known that if I hadn't read Gloria Stewart Jones' book. So for the community and us to document, that's where I came from. And then there's a book by Annette Gordon Reed. You definitely have to get this for your library, called On Juneteenth. Real short book. I mean, really, very excellent about what Juneteenth is all about. But she's telling it from her experience living there in Texas. And just a few pieces. This is on the part on a Texas town, because what she's writing feels the same way that I did in my community in Penland years later. It says the notion of separation being inherently unequal didn't take account of what it meant for black students to have black teachers, particularly at the precise moment in history. Strong bonds existed between teachers and students at Booker T. It's a school that was there in Texas. They were neighbors, relatives, in some cases, relatives, and fellow church members. The bonds forged in the classrooms were solidified outside the school, suffusing every aspect of the lives of students and teachers. The classroom was everywhere, really. And so that means you're developing an opportunity for growth. So it was a mission. Education was about the individual students, an explicit mission of race uplift. So when you're able to have your own schools and you're controlling that, you change the scope of how students excel. Becoming educated was an act of resistance. She goes on to say about her mother's experience. Her mother was a black teacher, and then like my grandmother's a black teacher. And then when you start to have to, the schools are dismantled because the school in Penland was no longer in existence. She then went to teach in the school system, which was not controlled by us. My mother confessed later in life that while she took joy in all of her students, she had become a teacher, quote, to teach black students, unquote. Quote, I can't talk to them the way we used to, unquote, she said. What she meant was that it was harder to address black students in the classroom and talk openly about their common mission of moving the black community ahead, reminding them that this was a large part of what their education was about. That message had no place in what were now the predominantly white classes. So things change as the educational system changes, which is problematic. I have a book called Where Everybody Looks Like Me, at the Crossroads of America's Black Colleges and Culture. This is by Rod Stodgehill. Probably can't see it there, but you look up his name, Ron Stodgehill. Excellent book because he broke things down about what was going on at Howard Morehouse when he got rid of President Morehouse and why that happened. The Board of Trustees, how they can probably sometimes be a problem. About Morris Brown, who's coming back now, but the Board of Trustees was maybe a challenge why they failed at some point. But we start to study our schools, we start to understand They got their own problems, but we need to be in position to try to control that. So when we're trying to control our own environments, we have people that fear that. We saw what happened in well, we didn't see, but in 2021, we saw what happened because it was on video about people trying to take over the Capitol. We say people, wasn't black people. Even though there was some there, but it was a insurrection by melanin recessive people. And now we have 1898. Guess what? Go back in time. They did this before. So when we say fear of a black planet, back then was Reconstruction, 1898. So they feared the black people having control of their own environments. Now we fast forward. I'm talking about education in school. If we don't have access to our own school systems, guess what? We're going to be in trouble. People are having these charter schools, and all this privatization is to keep the opportunity away from you creating your own school systems. Look at this. Now, the reason why we got to study ourselves and understand the nature of people attacking you, because this is from the September issue of the Final Call. This is a part on how they deal with depopulation. But it says American History of Medical Racism and Savagery. Wouter Busan was director of Project Post, the white South African biological and chemical warfare agency that developed various poisons, viruses, and biological agents and drugs to use against blacks, including a vaccine that caused sterility. Now, one of my most popular videos is people looking at ethnic weapons. I talked about that way back in the day. It was 2 decades ago. Ethnic weapons. Busan was called the Mengele of South Africa. And you don't see it, but I got a picture of Steve Biko on my shirt. I'll break him down a little later on, but Steve Biko, South Africa. Mengele of South Africa was suspected of at least 229 poisoning murders. That's a whole lot of action. When asked about his racist operation, Busan did not mention Hitler, Mengele, or the Nazis. Quote, I must confirm that the structure of the project was based on the U.S. system. That's where we learned the most. And I wrote down in one of my books called Dark Matters, Dark Secrets. I talk about that in the chapter on drugs. I talked about on page 131, 133. I mentioned how in South Africa, 1985, P.W. Botha was talking about putting some agents in people's not drugs, in the drinks. That's why we got to question the whole malt liquor consumption in black communities, why it's marketed just for black people. Pay attention. So you don't understand the scene, but it's a crime scene. This just happened a few months ago in July 2022. That's South Africa. We just talked about the South African mindset, but in a black community, you have kids, teenagers, dead after going to a bar. Some of them should have been there in the first place. But 21 teens died in the South African tavern and all had methanol in their blood. Methanol is a toxic form of alcohol that is used as a solvent in pesticides and fuel. So what we're saying here is something happened. 21 dead. We already know there's something going on with people wanting to control populations. So watch what you consume. Look at this. A highly probable Pussy Riot activist was poisoned, say German doctors. Now, Pussy Riot is a Russian group that sings about revolution and change. And so one of the people supporting them, this guy named Pyotr Verzalov, is being treated in Berlin. And this is now in September 2018, after falling ill last week after court hearing in Russia. It says this Pussy Riot activist fell ill in Moscow, was almost certainly poisoned. Of course, Russia's not saying he did anything. German doctors treating him in Berlin said on Tuesday, adding that he may have been the victim of an unknown anticholinergic agent. So acetylcholine is something that causes stimulation, something that blocks that, which is an anticholinergic agent, causes the body to lock up. So some of his symptoms, he had amnesia, loss of vision, and was unable to walk and talk. from some agent that some people are saying that, oh, Russians would have never done that. Fast forward to this leader named Alexei Navalny. All this is in the media. You can check this out yourself. You've just been not paying attention, not been looking, but it's happening. He was poisoned. So a Russian agent sent to tell opposition leader Alexei Navalny has revealed how he was poisoned in August of 2020 with the lethal nerve agent Novichok planted in his underpants. People are devious. Again, when you talk about changing the nature of the way that imperialism is run and how capitalism operates, they will do whatever they can to dismantle that. I say they, we're talking about, again, I guess you can say oligarchs, people who are controlling, running money. And how they do it? Drugs. There's a book called Deadly Medicine by Peter Mancall. Put that on your list because it talks about how the Native Americans were exploited, but it talks about, again, how drugs are used to manipulate. And look at the other one by John Potash, Drugs as Weapons Against Us. Talks about, how they went and taxed, it says right there, Jimi Hendrix, Panthers, John Lennon, Kurt Cobain, and Tupac, and all these activists. So this whole drug phenomenon that occurs in our community happens for a reason, because they're silencing those who may have a voice. So in conclusion, I want to talk about some people who've all, been impacted by my work, but we must get back to the basics. That is, we have to start having independent education and focus on self-knowledge. I've been fortunate enough for 30 years to be teaching. So again, it's like a 30-year anniversary. So, hey, I can't do this forever. I have to pass it on to the next generation. And for them to not know some of these storylines and these people is problematic. I mean, just to start, Steve Biko. I got a chance to teach in South Africa. No, not just South Africa. I went to South Africa, but I got a chance to teach in Brazil, where they have an institute called the Steve Biko Institute. So I got a chance to teach the next generation there about what they need to do. It was so fulfilling that I went back several times to teach in Brazil. They have a Steve Biko Institute. That's where I taught. Steve Biko talked about about the oppressor, about education, how they control things. What was the quote? It said, the most powerful tool in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. The most powerful tool in the hand of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. May Steve Biko's soul rest in peace. It's a crime not to be able to defend yourself. So whenever people start talking about dismantling and taking away your guns and your weaponry, it's like, well, okay, well, you take away yours too. But the system is all about, again, fighting with weapons. And so if you're being told to dismantle, it should be a common thing. This whole nonviolence that went down with the civil rights movement was problematic because how do you defend against that? Love is not going to fight a bullet. It can change some things because we saw what Martin Luther King did to help out, but guess what? He's gone. Malcolm's gone. All our people fought for us to be strong are gone because guess what? We didn't defend them. So know thy enemy. Know yourself first, but know thy enemy. Again, if people want to be drugging you and putting in things in your food items because you don't know yourself about what impacts you, that's a problem. Be remembers of the way. Take that from Iyikwe Arma's book called 2000 Seasons. And write your own story. I mean, if you don't tell the story, then who's going to tell it? Someone else that may not have your best interest. That's why education for liberation is so key. You can't be liberated if you don't have your knowledge of yourself. So for me, melanin on my mind and making an impact has been a major thrust of my work. And so, as I conclude here, I'm just honored that others have quoted my work and used my material in their writings and literature. So I just want to acknowledge them on the end here. Omiyale Jube, sister out of Las Vegas, with a book called Navigate Your Existence, 7 Keys to the African American Resurrection. So she's in this education liberation platform. And again, I honor her for respecting my work and documenting my work and hers. We have a sister named Sabrina Universal Lawton, Evolve to Love. She wrote a book called Keep Your Sexy Sacred. She, in her way of discussing spirituality, using Christianity as a way to kind of ground people and the challenges she's going through life to help others to excel and grow. She talks about melanin in her books. And so she acknowledges my work in her book. So much respect to her for doing her work. Another sister who documents some work that I've done is called Joyce Moore and Aisha Chilcote. They wrote a book called The Purple Mind, Shield of Protection. If you get a chance to check this out, again, they're talking about the changes that are going on in our environment and knowing what you're putting in your body. They deal with the issue of herbs and in your immune system, but they're focusing also on a Christian-based way of looking at protecting yourself. So I'm honored that people put my work in their books. And another sister who wrote a book, she calls herself J.A. Deutsch. She wrote a book called Melanin Guide to Spiritual Awakening. Powerful sister because she does the history, but she also talks about diet and nutrition, cleansing. And we are working together with the Melanin Institute of Human Technology. Perhaps that's where we will create more education for liberation classes. So be ready for that. And then I got a buddy in England, Leon Marshall, wrote a book called The Hidden Science of Melanin. And you know I wrote The Science of Melanin. I wrote that. Second edition. This is 2004, but the other one was written in 1995. So I've been in the game for a while. So I'm ecstatic that the brother has taken it to another level. He has the Hidden Science Academy there in England. Check out the hiddenscienceacademy.com and get this book. Again, he does a great job of creating a whole educational platform for people to study melanin. So he quotes my work, and so much respect to this brother here. And then he also respects the Layla of Africa. May his soul rest in peace. He's passed. But he talks about what makes black people black. He talks about melanin from a scientific perspective, homeopathic approach in terms of his delivery. But brother Leon Marshall got his foundation from Layla Africa. He then read my work, and then he built his platform over there in England. So much respect to him for doing that. Perhaps you heard of brother Kaba Hiawatha Kameni. Have never met the brother, but he supports my work. Shabaka Stone and Spirituality Before Religions. Get a chance to get his books. You see him on the internet. Much respect to him for talking about melanin and the issue of dealing with science and spirituality. So for the Kaaba. And then I'm a co-author with a brother named Bruce Bynum. But you got to get Dark Light Consciousness. Melanin, Serpent Power, and the Luminous Matrix of Reality. Got to get this book. I mean, just the resources that he provides. And again, quotes my work, so I much respect for him for doing that. Also wrote a book called The African Unconscious. So Dr. Bruce Bynum, you got to get his work. Powerful brother. Clinical psychologist. So for me, what I've done, again, if you check out the work, Science of Melanin, told you about how I had already talked about the issue of the drugs and what they may be putting in some of our items and what we may be consuming, and that makes us ill. So I've talked about that in Dark Matter, Dark Secrets. And then my most recent book wrote in 2020, Pigment Power, continued on, and people have found this very valuable in terms of their growth and development. And I'm excited to say that we have revised Why Darkness Matters, the Power of Melanin in the Brain. So you see the authors there, and Dr. Richard King has passed. May his soul rest in peace. But I did an obituary also in the book, honor his contribution. But we have revised the book, and it's now ready for distribution. So this book is much better than the last version that was out there. Was not well constructed in terms of the formatting, but we're ready to go. So again, education for liberation means that you have to have self-knowledge. People all over the planet, like Steve Biko, people all over the planet have tried their best to educate our minds, but you have to be willing, ready, and righteous to do this. So again, thanks for another learning lesson on my YouTube channel about education for liberation. And again, much respect to those who honor my work. and let's continue on to grow and develop together. Peace and blessings to you.